we'll see. Is everybody ready to go? Let's proclaim the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fantasy football fans. I'm your host, Jim Sella, in studio with J Dash. We got our sleepers and situational starters for you for week 15. If you're listening, you're probably still in the playoffs, or you're just mad because you lost and you want to know what you should have done if you were still in it. Either way, we enjoy your listening.
I don't think there's any of those people.
Well, I lost in one league and I'm listening.
You're still in a league though,
Oh.
because you're still in fantasy. Like if I didn't do this, I could care less right now.
You would love it. You'd be emailing me fantasy stats all day.
Anyways, let's get started with the situational starters, man. Who you going with this week?
I'm going to go with Julius Thomas, the tight end from Jacksonville. They're taking on Atlanta this week. They give up the 6th most points to fantasy tight ends. Part of the reason I'm taking Julius Thomas is because I got him in my lineup, and I'm really banking on him doing good. But
so you're playing him?
I'm playing him. He scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. He's got 30 targets in the last 4 games. He has 3 double-digit fantasy performances during that time. Atlanta is just boom. I mean, if you could say a team exploded a quarter of the way through the season or imploded, well, they exploded, I think, too. I mean, Jesus, they didn't explode in a good way, but they were 6-0, and what are they now? Like 6-100? They're just complete garbage.
They do suck.
Their defense, Dan Quinn, you thought he'd have it figured out. He come from Seattle. He ran a good defense there, and nope, they're just garbage.
Actually, I mean, their defense has been better than I actually thought it would be this season. It's the offense that has really been the letdown. Although, I'm not saying Atlanta's defense is great or anything. They've been stopping receivers all right, though. So, what they've had trouble against is the tight end. You're right. So, I could see Blake Bortles looking Julius Thomas's way a good bit in this game. And you see Jacksonville's on a roll right now, man.
Put up 51 on the Colts last week. Might as well do it to the freaking Falcons.
Yeah, they have a chance to win that division and everything right now.
Yeah, coming into the season, everybody thought, Colts number 1 in the division by far. Maybe the Texans at number 2. And none of them want to be number 1.
Or even the Texans winning the division wouldn't have been a surprise at all.
Yeah, just with luck as the better quarterback,
right.
I would have picked Indy.
But Julius Thomas, 5 catches last week, 54 yards and a touchdown versus Indy. Terrible team, obviously, as well. So I see him doing it big. He's done it big for over a month now. He's finally becoming that type of tight end they thought they were getting when they first brought him over. He was injured to start the season, but now he's on a roll. They got some good receivers out there. I know TJ Yeldon might not go this week, so they might have a little bit more trouble in the running game as well and have to turn to the pass more often because Blake Bortles has been getting it done recently. I'm going to go with Ted Ginn Jr. from the Carolina Panthers going up against the New York Giants in New York. They let up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. He has 8 or more targets in 4 of his last 7 games, so he's still a little bit inconsistent, but actually over the past 2 weeks, he has dominated. 7 catches, 200 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That was against New Orleans and Atlanta, like we were just talking about. And he actually plays Atlanta again next week after this New York Giants game. But he has 4 double-digit fantasy performances in his last 5 weeks. We were talking about Cam Newton yesterday. He is doing it big right now, on pace to be the MVP in the league. And Ted Ginn Jr. is really stepping up here recently, and I think he has over 60 points in the past 2 weeks.
Only thing that scares me about Ted Ginn is he drops a ton of passes for a wide receiver.
Right. So
he's got to get it in like 4 or 5 catches. He's not going to get too many than that. I think last week he had 2 catches for 100 and something yards and a touch or something. That's how he got all his points.
2 touchdowns.
Not saying he's not. He had 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Not saying he's not going to get you mad points. It's just.
Well, I'm not saying he's going to get 30 points. He's a situational starter. There's no doubt about it. But I expect at least 15 out of him here in this matchup against the Giants, who have not been able to stop anyone in the passing game this season.
Even Miami was scoring points on Monday.
2 other guys you could go with are a couple Detroit Lions. Go with Matt Stafford, a quarterback going against New Orleans. They let up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. He was somewhat of a letdown last week. 245 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick at St. Louis. St. Louis was really struggling defensively. But really, over his last 3 games, he has 9 touchdowns and just 1 interception. And the Saints defense has allowed 36 touchdown passes this season. So I think Kelvin Johnson's going to have a bounce back game from last week. And Golden Tate, you could go with him as well. They led up the 16th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Last week, when Kelvin Johnson got shut down, he had 9 catches for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has 8 or more targets in 4 straight games, 39 targets total in that span. And he has 6 straight double-digit fantasy performances as well. 3 TDs in his last 3 games. Golden Tate has came up big, just like Ted Ginn Jr. over the past couple weeks. So I'm going to roll with some Detroit Lions this week.
Who names their kid Golden?
I don't know. It's crazy.
Weird first name. Hopefully, it's a nickname.
It might be a nickname. Who knows, man? Golden Tate, though. I like that guy.
Why don't you marry him?
No thanks. Sleepers.
Come on, man. It's obvious who I'm going to take on this list. You put Heath Miller in front of me. I'm taking Heath Miller. I don't care what it is.
That's how I know I can get the guy I want.
Right. You just put Heath Miller in something. That works. See? He's going up against Denver. Yes, Denver has the number 1 defense against passing yards and scoring or whatever, but that's not fantasy stats. They actually give up the 11th most points to fantasy tight ends. Heath Miller had 10 targets last week. 10 catches. He did only have 66 yards, and I don't think he had a touchdown.
I'll take 16 points.
But, yeah, I mean, come on. He's Roethlisberger's security blanket. Denver's going to be getting after Pittsburgh. I mean, they're going to be putting pressure on Ben, so the down-the-field passing might not be there. Those shorter, open routes, like right behind the linebackers will. Heath Miller can probably have a big week this week. He needs to have a big week for Pittsburgh to win. Maybe not a big fantasy week, just he needs to play well and be effective in this game.
Well, Big Ben looks his way, and he's going to have to look his way in this game because Denver can stop receivers. Not saying they're going to stop Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant for sure, but they do a good job against receivers. They sort of give up points against the tight ends, though. And Heath Miller, 6 or more targets in each of his last 5 games played. 42 targets in that span, and look at this, in his last 3 home games, 26 targets to Heath Miller. So when they're playing at home, Heath Miller is heavily involved in this offense.
Everybody is down on that guy. He has 49 catches this year for 456 yards. Now, he does only have 1 touchdown.
That's why.
But, I mean, he's Big Ben's longest tenured pass catcher. I don't want to call him a receiver. But he's been there the longest on that offense, other than Big Ben. He loves that guy.
You know who I'm going with here? Bilal Powell.
About to blast through the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, going into Dallas. They led up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs, actually. They've been a pretty solid defense. I mean, the problems they have are obviously offensively with no Tony Romo out there. But they do give up points to running backs, and you look over the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago at the New York Giants, Bilal Powell had 8 catches, 91 yards and a touchdown. Last week versus Tennessee, 5 catches, 46 yards and a touchdown. He also added 30-some yards rushing as well. Chris Ivory ran well in that game too, but it didn't really matter. Both of them did it big. And actually, I think I'd trust Bilal Powell over Chris Ivory. I think Powell can be more consistent just because Ryan Fitzpatrick throws the ball a ton. And the New York Jets style of offense, this isn't something we've seen out of them in years. They never throw the ball. They're always a running team. But with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Brandon Marshall coming over this season, they've been able to do big.
I hate saying this because I love Brett Favre, but he didn't play well the 1 year he played for the Jets.
No.
But they haven't had a quarterback, and I'm not even saying Chad Pennington was that great, but he was the last one to even play well for more than 1 season. Pennington had a pretty decent career, I guess. Not great.
Yeah,
better than I would have
I
done in football.
Obviously, all these guys.
He was a very accurate passer.
Yeah, he was all right. He was supposed to be better, actually, though.
A couple shoulder injuries, I think, hurt him, though.
Who
else you got?
You could go with quarterback Alex Smith going up against Baltimore. We've seen Baltimore just get smoked against Seattle. Now, Seattle's offense is on a roll right now, whereas Alex Smith and the Kansas City Chiefs last week only put up 10 points against San Diego. But they had 29 or more points in 5 straight games before that. Baltimore has been getting torched all year, not just against Seattle last week. They led up the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. So, Alex Smith, I know he was a little bit of a letdown last week because I actually picked him to have a big week and he didn't do it. But I'm going to go back to him this week. I think Baltimore's secondary is terrible. And the one thing they do is stop the run. So, you really have to pass against Baltimore to move down the field.
Well, Baltimore's down to their 3rd-string quarterback now, too. Flacco's out. Schaub's out. Who did they have Jimmy Santa Clausen playing for him?
Yeah, I think he's actually starting this week. I know they went out and signed Ryan Mallett,
Yeah.
but I think Jimmy Clausen is going to start again. But they said if Matt Schaub's healthy, he might be the guy.
Either way, any of the guys that might play are going to have a lot of 3-and-outs, and that's not going to help Baltimore's defense any. Or they might have a lot of picks. Schaub's definitely going to have
Well,
picks.
I actually think, you think it too, obviously. We think Baltimore's going to keep this game close enough. So, and that's what they need to do. If Kansas City goes out there and gets up 20 points, they might start trying to run the ball then. We don't want that. I think Baltimore can keep this game close enough where the Kansas City offense is going to have to pass throughout the game, don't you?
Believe it.
Speaking of that game, though, how about Kamar Aiken on the other side?
The only thing that worries me is he has nobody throwing him the football.
He doesn't, but look, Kansas City, they led up the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. He actually has 6 or more targets and 5 or more receptions in 6 straight games, has double-digit fantasy points in all 6 of those games. So while he has no quarterback, you're obviously right, and it's going to be Schaub or Clausen this week and maybe a stretch here, Ryan Mallett, correct? They brought him in. Well, no matter who's been a quarterback, though, Flacco or whoever, Kamar Aiken has been getting it done with whoever's in. Look, last week, 5 catches for 90 yards versus Seattle. Now, I know last week Seattle was way ahead, so all Baltimore was doing was passing. But he's been consistent since Steve Smith went down. He's been getting it done every single week. So I'm going to trust him again here versus Kansas City. And after that, they have Pittsburgh. So, if he gets it done versus Kansas City, I think he'd be able to do it against Pittsburgh as well.
Believe it. Pittsburgh, 31st in the league in passing yards against.
Yeah, believe it. How about your deep sleeper this week, man?
I fell asleep while I was trying to decide who these were because they're such deep sleepers, so I decided to go with T.J. Yates for the Houston Texans. The Indianapolis Colts are horrible. I've just come to the conclusion that right now, you know what I mean?
Like right now,
yeah. They've just had some bad luck throughout the year, no pun intended. They've had some injuries at the quarterback position. They've had some injuries at the running back position. Andre Johnson hasn't worked out like they hoped. This defense is just getting worn out because the offense isn't able to produce anything. When the freaking Jaguars put up 51 on you, you know it's just not working out for you this year. And I just don't think the Colts are going to even get much better. I know Luck's out this week for sure. He might be back weeks after. I don't think it's going to help. I think it's too late. I think it's just a lost season for Indy. And not that they're going to pack it in on purpose because professionals don't really do that. But just ride it out, get another good pick, try to build on that defense to help Andrew Luck next year.
Yeah. Brian Hoyer, he's out. He has
Concussion.
a neck injury, a wrist injury. He has a concussion, too.
Yeah, he had a second concussion in a month. He's scared. I read an article that said he's worried about playing again this year.
Man, I like Brian Hoyer, too. But, yeah, you're right. Against Indy last week, 51 points put up by Blake Bortles, obviously, and against the Steelers 2 weeks ago, 45 points. So 96 points in the past 2 weeks. And TJ Yates, he's played one game where he's had more than 11 pass attempts this season, and he had 229 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions in that game. He actually has no interceptions on the season, but he also went 5 for 11 with 69 yards and a touchdown at Cincinnati in Week 10 after Hoyer got hurt. So TJ Yates hasn't looked terrible, and he's drawn a perfect matchup this week going up against Indy.
Yeah, he's like feast or famine, really. He'll either throw 3 picks and lose you the game or throw no picks and give you a pretty good chance at winning the football game. And I just think Indy's defense, they're just not scary at all. Yeah. Hot garbage.
I'm going to go with a Seattle wide receiver, but not Doug Baldwin and not Tyler Lockett. I'm going to go with Jermaine Kearse going up against Cleveland this week. They led up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers.
I always think of Javon Kearse, that freak D lineman the Titans had.
He was a beast. But look, Jermaine Kearse, he is not a beast. But last week, he had 7 catches for 74 yards at Baltimore, like we were saying before. Baltimore's a terrible defense. Baldwin and Lockett both blew it up, obviously. They stepped up as the number 1 and number 2 wide receiver out there. But Seattle, they lost their running backs. They don't know what they're doing at running back. It's probably going to be Bryce Brown at this point. But Jermaine Kearse, look at this. Versus the AFC North this season. He has 13 catches, 159 yards, and all 3 of his touchdowns this season in those 3 games. He has 11 fantasy points at Cincinnati, 20 fantasy points versus Pittsburgh, and 14 fantasy points at Baltimore. He averages 15 points against the AFC North. So Jermaine Kearse, he's going to keep that streak going against Cleveland this week. And we've seen Russell Wilson's been dominating recently. 5 touchdowns every other week, it seems like now. While I still like Baldwin and Lockett, obviously, I'm going to say Jermaine Kearse has a good game as well.
Anybody Russell Wilson's throwing the football to right now is probably going to have at least a decent game. I mean, 5 touchdowns in 2 of the last 3 weeks or 2 of the last 4 weeks?
Like that.
Something like that. Ridiculous.
But Jimmy Graham's out too, so obviously that means Curse is going to get a couple more looks that way as well.
Jimmy Graham, he's out for a while, that poor guy.
Yeah. One other wide receiver here you could look at is Robert Woods for the Buffalo Bills. He goes up against Washington this week. In Washington, they led up the 13th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Last week at Philadelphia, 5 catches for 106 yards. And he scored a TD the previous week as well versus Houston. It wasn't a huge game, but he did get into the end zone. He has 5 or more targets in each of his last 5 games, in 6 of his last 7 games. But look, he has 37 targets over the last 5 games. And in road games this season, he has 45 targets in 5 road games. So he averages 9 targets per road game.
He loves them road games, man.
Exactly.
T-Mobile's sick of throwing it to Sammy Watkins.
Well, actually, Woods came up as the more consistent receiver last week. I still trust Watkins way more than I trust Woods, but I think both of them can get it done this week.
I got Tyler Lockett and Bryce Brown and Curtis Artis-Payne.
Nice.
Nobody's picking anybody up in my league right now.
I like Payne if he ends up being the starter.
He's projected to get 0 so far.
Yeah, we'll see. That's just stupid Yahoo projections.
Believe it. Yahoo doesn't know squat. I dropped Edelman even though I won him. Then I wanted Brown, so I dropped him.
Yeah, people were picking Edelman up too. I think it's just not going to happen with him.
They said he could play in Week 16. Could. It's a could.
Yeah, I'm not trusting it. But if he does, I mean, that's cash money right there.
Anybody else you got for the fans?
Nope.
That's all there is.
Any questions, hit us up. We'll answer them.
Hit us up on Twitter at bet_the_spread. Hit me up on Twitter at betjimthewin. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/betthespread. Keep coming back to YouTube and click and subscribe. Hopefully we helped you win your fantasy week.